Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Pijanavallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Buddhadikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Buddhadikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the Goddess of Learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the 7th day of December 2018 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order. Chapter 8, Dhruva Maharaj leaves home for the forest. Text number 37. Param Tibhavanot Krishtam Jigisho Saruvartmame Bruyasmat Pitrabir Brahman Anyar up Yanadishtitam Padam Chibavanot Krishtam Jigisho Sadhuvartmame Bruhyasmat Pitrabhir Brahman Anyar up Yanadishtitam Padam Chibavanot Krishtam Jigisho Sadhuvartmame Bruyasmat Pitrabhir Brahman Anyar apyanadhishtitam Padam Chibavanot Krishtam Jigisho Sadhuvartmame Bruyasmat Pitrabhir Brahman Anyar apyanadhishtitam Padam Chibavanot Krishtam Jigisho Sadhuvartmame Bruyasmat Pitrabhir Brahman Anyarapyanadishtitam. Jamal, could you do the curtains? Thank you. Padam, position. Tribhuvana, the three worlds. Utkrishtam, the best. Jigisho, desirous. Sadhu, honest. Vartma, way. Me, unto me. Bruhi, please tell. Asmat, our. Pitrabhihi, by the forefathers, the father and grandfather. Brahman, O great Brahman. Anyayi, by others. Api, even. Anadhishtitam, not acquired. Translation, O learned Brahman, this is Dhruva speaking to Narada. O learned Brahman, I want to occupy a position more exalted than any yet achieved within the three worlds by anyone, even by my fathers and grandfathers. If you will oblige, kindly advise me of an honest path to follow by which I can achieve the goal of my life. Purport. When Dhruva Maharaj refused to accept the Brahminical instruction of Narada Muni, naturally the next question would be what sort of instruction he wanted. So even before Narada asked, Dhruva Maharaj expressed his heartfelt desire. His father, of course, was the emperor of the entire world, and his grandfather, Lord Brahma, was the creator of the universe. Dhruva Maharaj expressed his desire to possess a kingdom better than those of his father and grandfather. He frankly stated that he wanted a kingdom which had no competitor within the three worlds, namely the higher, middle, and lower planetary systems. The greatest personality within this universe is Lord Brahma, and Dhruva Maharaj wanted a position even greater than his. He wanted to take advantage of Narada Muni's presence because he knew very well that if Narada Muni, the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna, could bless him or show him the path, then certainly he would be able to occupy a more exalted position than any person within the three worlds. Thus he wanted help from Narada Ji to achieve that position. Dhruva Maharaj wanted a position greater than that of Brahma. This was practically an impossible proposition, but by pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a devotee can achieve even the impossible. One particular point mentioned here is that Dhruva Maharaj wanted to occupy an exalted position not by hook or by crook, but by honest means. This indicates that if Krishna offered him such a position, then he would accept it. That is the nature of a devotee. He may desire material gain, but he accepts it only if Krishna offers it. Dhruva Maharaj was sorry to refuse the instruction of Narada Muni. Therefore he requested him to be merciful to him by showing a path by which he could fulfill his mind's desires. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. One time. Seem to have contracted a cold. So here, Dhruva Maharaj, going to be a Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, is expressing his honest desire that he can't do what Narada Muni is suggesting, wait until later so that he can learn the process of yoga. But he did ask for any instruction that would help him achieve his present goal, which was a seemingly impossible goal, a kingdom, a position greater than that even of his grandfather, who happens to be Lord Brahma. So Narada Muni, seeing the sincerity of this little Kshatriya, Dhruva, he gave him instructions which Dhruva would accept, and told him this is what you need to do to fulfill your desire. And in the process of doing that, Narada Muni knew that he would transform himself, his heart, and he would give up the material desire. And because he gave up the material desire, he was most suitable to actually run the kingdom, because he was detached, and the only reason he ruled was to fulfill his duty and to help the citizens. So Prabhupada says here, a devotee may desire material gain, but he only accepts it. He accepts it only if Krishna offers it. So this is what it means to live in the material world and be a devotee, is that one needs certain material things in order to survive. And a devotee minimizes those, and whatever Krishna gives, you accept. And in some cases, that's a very opulent position. But if you come to the point of detachment, the Yukta Vairagya program, Anasaktasya Vishayanyata Hamapayunjata Nirbandha Krishna Sambandha Yukta Vairagya Muchyate. Not being attached to the object of the senses, but using them when appropriate and in the appropriate manner for service to Krishna, then one does not become bound up to these objects of the senses in the mood of sense gratification, but becomes bound up to Krishna, for whom you're engaging the objects. And that's what we want. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandha. This is called proper detachment in yoga, in bhakti yoga. And that vairagya is almost like a thermometer to understand how you're advancing. Because Krishna consciousness does precisely what happens to Dhruva in a systematic way, and that is take your material desires and by the process of hearing, chanting, remembering, etc., transform them into the main desire is to serve Krishna and to please Krishna, glorify Krishna, and serve the devotees and all the other things that we do. So that development of desire is compared, as we know, to a growing creeper in the heart. And watering that creeper by the process of devotional service is likened by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to growing this wonderful fruit of love of Godhead. And along the way, in that watering, hearing, and chanting process, one has to be careful to avoid the offenses. The offenses can uproot the tender creeper of devotion. And meanwhile, especially when we begin devotional service, there are all kinds of other desires in there. And they're compared to weeds. Everyone knows, every farmer knows that weeds can choke off an actual plant that you're trying to grow. And so one has to be careful not to water those weeds while you're watering the creeper. In other words, that's what the restrictions are for. No illicit sex, meat eating, gambling, intoxication, and there's a whole bunch of other do's and don'ts that starve the weeds of material desire and help the creeper of devotion to flourish. And that's what our sadhana bhakti is all about. So Dhruva is a perfect example of this transformation of the heart. There's one chapter in the second canto near the beginning called the change in heart. And there's a famous verse in there about the steel-framed heart. Do you remember that one, Balaram? Yeah. I'm going to refer to that. This is a perfect example of how misediting can obscure the meaning of a verse for many, many years. 2:3:24. Let's see. So, tadashma sadam vidiham batedam yadgrihimana harinama dheyai navikriye tata yadavikaro netre jalam gatu ruheshu harsha. So the translation here in the Bhagavatam, this verse is also quoted in the text of the CC, and Prabhupada has another translation to it. But this one says, certainly that heart is steel framed, which, in spite of one's chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration, does not change when ecstasy takes place. Tears fill the eyes, and the hairs stand on end. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first read that, I was scratching my head. How does that work? In other words, the heart does not change.
Because his idea is that if one does have concentration, isn't it that those things will happen? I mean, they're likely to happen?
Well, it's not just concentration, but if your heart is open to it. In other words, if you're not the whole the idea is that if you do it properly, your heart should melt. If you chant properly with concentration and in good consciousness, you're not consciously performing some sinful activity, on the strength of chanting. But what this says is the heart is steel framed. One is chanting the holy name with concentration, and the heart is steel framed because it does not change when ecstasy takes place. When I soon read that, I said, well, that's when ecstasy takes place. That's a change of heart. If your ecstasy is actually, you're feeling ecstasy, your heart is changing. So I couldn't understand what this is all about. When I reviewed the second canto carefully, I discovered something very fascinating. And that is that, first of all, this translation, because there's different interpretations of the word, this translation is based on what Prabhupada gives us in the 5th paragraph, where Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti has very critically discussed all these Baba displays. He's describing the different symptoms of ecstasy, in connection with some unscrupulous neophytes imitating the above symptoms for cheap appreciation. And not only Vishwanath, but Rupa Goswami treated them very critically. So sometimes all the above symptoms of ecstasy are imitated, all 8 are imitated by mundane devotees, Prakrita Sahajis. But the pseudo-symptoms are at once detected when one sees the pseudo-devotee addicted to so many forbidden things. So that's not immediately obvious from this verse. And it's buried, it's in the middle of this long purport. So, but I still didn't figure out what's going on with this translation. So when you go back historically to how the second canto was produced, sometimes we forget, how these books were produced and why sometimes things were missed. So this second canto, Srila Prabhupada wrote in India. He didn't publish it in India, but he wrote it in India, literally typed it out with 2 fingers. And when he came to America, in his trunk, or in one of the trunks that he had on the boat, was a big manuscript of the second canto. Now, it was only 10 chapters, so it's not nearly as big as the first canto was. That he brought in his published form. But he had it in typed form, manuscript. And Srila Prabhupada was so frugal that he would type practically with no margins and very little space between the lines, which is not suitable for editing. In editing, you got to be able to mark between the lines and in the margins. That's the way it works. So in order for Dravida Prabhu to edit the second canto, he needed to retype the whole thing. That was part of his first service for Prabhupada, was retyping the entire second canto. Now all of that is there in the archives in North Carolina, called the Bhaktivedanta Archives. It used to be the BBT Archives, now it's the Bhaktivedanta Archives. And they very carefully shot each page and provided that for myself and Jai Wedmarsh to have on a computer, so we could refer to the original if we're looking at it. So what happened was, when he typed this particular translation, he messed up. He mistyped it. And what he had was, does not change when transformation, he typed when ecstasy takes place. What Prabhupada had was, does not change when, what was it, evidence takes place. The idea is that does not change even when you may be displaying the symptoms. You understand? In other words, your heart isn't changing, but you're displaying all these symptoms for external name and fame. That's the way Prabhupada, but after retyping it, and then he edited the retype mistake, it came out like it is here. So the point here is that when we engage in devotional service, the heart is supposed to undergo a change. And that's the title of this chapter, I think chapter 3, A Change in Heart. It can do so only when we chant with great concentration and we avoid the 10 offenses. In other words, we can chant, as we don't chant that Bengali verse that they do in other temples, but after the 10 offenses, before the 10 offenses, I don't know the Bengali. But if one is infested with the 10 offenses to the holy name, one may chant the holy name for many, many births but not get the desired result. So that's why it's so important to know the offenses and avoid them and be progressive in one's chanting. So this steel-framed heart verse is very famous. And one wonders, well, okay, I must have a steel-framed heart. We're chanting all this time, all these years, and yet we're not experiencing the tears in the eyes and the hairs on end. So it's a fact. It's part of the science, is that these offenses are there, and plus we're not chanting with concentration, enough concentration. So these kind of verses encourage us to improve the quality of our chanting. This is really the whole point in Queen Kunti's prayer, where she says, Janmaishaya Shutashibe Edamana Madakpana Muman, Naiva Hattibadathan Dvaitfama Kinchana Gochara. That in this age especially we have been given this very easy process of purification and reaching perfection, the chanting of the holy name. But if we're infected with the greed for four main kind of opulences, with good birth, wealth, beauty, and mundane education, and we're proud of those, we have a certain amount of those, then you can't chant with deep feeling. That's another translation that was botched. I won't get into it. But the idea is that one, oh my dear Lord, your Lordship is easily approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted. Akinchana, that's what akinchana means. The word akinchana gochara. Gochara means something you can attain. So you're attainable easily by the akinchanas. The kinchanas are not necessarily those who have nothing, but those who claim nothing for themselves, even if it may be in their care. And so you have examples of some of Lord Chaitanya's devotees who were very wealthy, but they're using the king is building temples and putting on festivals and other like that. So, but even the poor man can be not a kinchana if whatever he has, he is very absorbed in, and he's longing to get more. That's not a kinchana. It's a state of mind. So, your Lordship can easily be approached, my dear Lord, but only by those who are materially exhausted, because those who are progressively intoxicated with the desire for good birth, education, high beauty, and wealth cannot chant your name with deep feeling, cannot address you with deep feeling. And the whole purport is about the quality of the chanting. So let me share that one with you. These prayers of Kunti, Srila Prabhupada loved these. And he, at one point in one of the lectures, he said we should all memorize them. That's what he said. We should all memorize all of them. Janmaishvarya. Okay. So Queen Kunti says, Janmaishvarya Shuddha Shiva Edamana Badakpamana Ibahati Bidatam Dvaitfama Kinchana Gochana. My Lord, your Lordship can easily be approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted, because one who is on the path of material progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, and bodily beauty, cannot address you with sincere feeling. So the implication here is that the easy approach is by chanting the holy name. But if we mess that approach up by being greedy for material things and performing the offenses, we have no way to advance really in devotional service. Being materially advanced means taking birth in an aristocratic family, possessing great wealth and education and attractive personal beauty. All materialistic people are mad after possessing all these material opulences, and this is known as the advance of material civilization. But the result is that by possessing all these material assets, one becomes artificially puffed up, intoxicated by such temporary possessions. Consequently, such materially puffed up persons are incapable of uttering the holy name of the Lord by addressing him feelingly. Oh Govinda! Oh Krishna! It is said in the Shastra that by once uttering the holy name of the Lord, the sinner gets rid of a quantity of sins he is unable to commit. Such is the power of uttering the holy name of the Lord. There is not the least exaggeration in this statement. Actually, the Lord's holy name has such powerful potency, but there's a quality to such utterances also. It depends on the quality of feeling. A helpless man can feelingly utter the holy name of the Lord, whereas a man who utters the same holy name in great material satisfaction can't be so sincere. This is 1:8:26. A materially puffed up person may utter the holy name of the Lord occasionally, but he's incapable of uttering the name in quality. Therefore, the four principles of material advancement, high parentage, good wealth, high education, attractive beauty, are, so to speak, disqualifications for progress on the path of spiritual advancement. The material covering of the pure spirit soul is an external feature, as much as fever is an external feature of the unhealthy body. The general process is to decrease the degree of the fever and not to aggravate it by maltreatment. Sometimes it is seen that spiritually advanced persons become materially impoverished. This is no discouragement. On the other hand, such impoverishment is a good sign, as much as the falling of temperature is a good sign. The principle of life should be to decrease the degree of material intoxication, which leads one to be more and more illusioned about the aim of life. Grossly illusioned persons are quite unfit for entrance into the kingdom of God. So this is a pitfall we've seen over the history of this movement, that Prabhupada warns about it extensively, that when you progress in devotional service, then the devotional service is followed by influence over others, and when you can influence others, you can make money. And when you can make money, you can enjoy the senses. So you may start out in a very renounced position, but by that renounced position, and if you really embrace it, then you'll advance. And by that advancement, more and more responsibility and power is given to you for the service of Krishna. But that's also tempting. We saw this in the 80s with our first crop of gurus, most of whom couldn't handle it. Suddenly you have all of these young, enthusiastic devotees who are, the momentum of the movement had been built up by Prabhupada, and they would go out and distribute books and bring so many thousands of dollars, and you've been in the movement like 7 years, or whatever it was, and so many of them it was too much, and they made a big mistake of like taking the position of Prabhupada. There were simultaneous guru pujas. Can you imagine? That was at one point we said that we can't have that, but because there was the time factor, they could they put the same guru puja in for the new gurus. So you had God brothers worshiping the guru. They're going God brothers as gurus. So the whole thing was kind of the movement came very close to dissolving at that point in the mid '80s. It didn't dissolve because there were many sincere senior devotees who weren't gurus, who pushed and organized in order to have the reform, and that things were saved in the 86, 87. But we saw, it's right there in the Shastra, that if you're not careful, the temptations of these four things, especially Aishwarya, from which everything comes. Aishwarya means the ability to control. It means money, but it means ability to control. So in our own life also, in our own individual devotional lives, we should be vigilant against these things. And that's why accepting austerities, especially preaching, whether it's book distribution or some other form, this is so pleasing to Lord Chaitanya, and it keeps one humble, to try to convince somebody about Krishna consciousness, to try to convince somebody to take a book. It's humbling because it's difficult and is oftentimes unsuccessful, and that's good because that means you have to pray from the bottom of your heart. You chant more feelingly. It's purifying. It's pleasing to Krishna. As he says in the Bhagavad Gita, there will never be any devotee more dear to me than me, he who takes the trouble to try to give Krishna to others. So that's the engine of this movement is, of course, the chanting of the holy name and the preaching. Lord Chaitanya's eternal instruction to Nityananda and Haridas. Bolo Krishna, Bojo Krishna, Koro Krishna Shika. chant Sri Krishna's holy name and worship him with all your heart and follow his instructions and give those instructions to others. That's the essence of this movement, and it will eternally be so. Okay, so back to our original verse. Any comments or questions so far?
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Yeah, so you're talking about like temptation, and one performs austerities, and there's some influence, or there may be some influence and money and followers and all this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just, you could say the power to not really fall victim to that. Because it is you could say it is tempting, but some people, they easily go for it, and then some people, they don't.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? Because there may be somebody who has the same amount of, followers and, people throwing money at them practically, but still, it doesn't affect them at all. And another person, it kind of bothers their mind, and they get all into it. And
Yeah.
Because practically speaking, a lot of devotees will have to deal with that.
Yeah, over time.
Yeah.
Over time. There's a lot of factors. There's the two main factors. Of course, the first factor is this unavoidable and super valuable factor of sincerity. Sincerity. If one is sincere in his desire to actually get rid of these anarthas, in lust, anger, greed, etc., and to be protected at the lotus feet of Krishna, then that goes a long way. Then you'll do the things that show that sincerity, which is like strict performance of sadhana, avoiding the things that will distract you. It's right there in the nectar of instruction, very scientific. If one is not so sincere, then you make a show of advancement, and you may seem to be very advanced, but your heart is not really getting fully purified. And when you get a little position of power, influence, or whatever it may be, you tend to misuse it or exploit it. So that sincerity has to be there. This is why a few years ago, I'm sure you remember, there was a big push after Rabindranath Swarupa had taken several years and wrote this book about the founder Acharya, about Srila Prabhupada as the founder Acharya. Why was that effort made, by the GBC, that all the devotees should remember Prabhupada is in the center, and why, and because he was the kind of the the pole star, for the whole movement. In other words, he set the standard for knowledge, for preaching, for ecstasy, for detachment, the Acharya. And that's how the movement grew, by association with him, either directly through his books, when I joined, I like to remember how, it was a house, it was a big house we were in, double wide or something, whatever. So there were, 60, 70, 80 devotees packed in there. And in those halls, you would always hear a tape of Prabhupada playing. There was all the devotees, throughout the day, you would hear 10, 20 people say, Prabhupada said, Prabhupada said, Prabhupada said, to get from letters or from lectures that they heard or from the books, And it was very much dependent. We were very much dependent on, Srila Prabhupada's example, his words, of course, and his instructions on how to worship the deity, how to chant Hare Krishna, how to do everything. So that presence of Prabhupada, within our hearts and minds, was a tremendously protective factor. And a lot of Harinam was going on. The standard was you go out either morning or afternoon. It was 3-hour sessions, and that was very helpful for me to get me settled. So the problem comes when we rebel. In other words, you have a certain position through sincerity, but then come the tests. You're given more responsibility, which means more freedom to make certain decisions. And those decisions can, if they're not purely motivated, can open up the influence of Maya. So there's no set formula. I mean, the set formula has been given by all the books, and by Srila Prabhupada himself. The difficulty is in following them strictly all the time. Because as soon as you slack off, Maya's right there. You don't have to wait. She's always right there. We're in the material world. And you'll feel the pull of the modes of nature. You'll feel the lessening of enthusiasm for performing services that you may not be so spontaneously attracted to. Those are actually the most valuable services. The ones that there's no material attraction. But the only motivation that you can have is to serve the lotus feet of Krishna and the spiritual master, for their pleasure. And then you find, after performing those services, that you feel more peaceful and blissful, and your heart is cleaner, and there's no temptation from the outside. So the whole thing is big psychology. We're working with the mind. Ultimately, we're working with this mind, and the mind also, interacts with the senses so much. So that the verses in the Gita, right, in the second chapter, Vishayava Nivartante, that you may restrict the senses, but only if you see, to the degree that you perceive and experience directly Krishna, the all-attractive one, can you remain fixed in detachment, because the very desire is being uprooted. So that state of nishta, or sthai bhava even, is not easy to get to. So we're all like struggling in that anartha nivritti stage. And that can go on for lifetimes. We don't want it to go on for lifetimes, but it's all dependent on how determined we are. It's a determination. And you get that, through association. Through association with others who are determined, others who are faithful, others who are detached. Then you'll want to do those things, and you see the value. You see the reflection in the person's personality and their enthusiasm for everything that has to do with Krishna bhakti. So it's not easy, because there is always, we're in the material world, there is always that ability just on the other side of the line to deviate and to allow the infection of Maya to come in. So we have to be determined, steadily determined. That's why Prabhupada always was talking about steadiness, regularity. Once you establish yourself, the morning program, that's a very valuable thing. That's one of the most valuable things of the ashram. Because I'm telling you, the first thing that goes when you become unregular is the Mangalarti. I mean, I love Alachua, and there's some very, very sincere devotees there. But in a community that size, with upwards of 700 devotees, the number of devotees who are in Mangalarti is maybe 30, 40 at tops. Sometimes it varies. And unfortunately, the average age is gradually creeping up, definitely over 50, probably at 55 at this point. Yeah, you've got old-timers who are trained that way, who aren't, going to somehow or other get to Mangalarti. There's a few, because I've been going there 20 years. They're always there, they're always there. But there's, it's harder when you live outside, and so forth. But that's, we should take advantage of it. We've got, the brahmachari life of the ashram, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you were speaking about how Maya is always right there.
Always right there.
Yeah.
Nikatasta Maya Japati Adharit is a verse.
And I was curious what your, I don't know if this has a Shastric answer, but I was curious to know your thoughts. When we're tempted by Maya, what comes first? Is it our subconscious or unconscious desire to not serve Krishna, and then we're tempted by Maya, or are we tempted by Maya and then we don't want to serve Krishna?
I'm not sure it really matters. The living entity has an inherent capability. I mean, I'm quoting Prabhupada, maybe not verbatim, but in gist, of forgetting Krishna and engaging in sense gratification. Even in the spiritual world, Prabhupada says, that's why we are, by nature, intrinsically, the marginal energy. We're on the margin. It means that we have the tendency, the ability to forget Krishna and become absorbed and overwhelmed by the bewildering material energy. So that means that we're prone to falling down. Now, yet, when we become fixed, we see that the pure devotee, despite all temptations, he doesn't. Purity meaning that, this famous pastime where Prabhupada is praying to the deity. The devotee asks him, Prabhupada, what are you praying for? What are you praying for? And Prabhupada said, I'm praying not to fall down. The devotee was shocked. He said, Prabhupada, you can't fall down, you're a pure devotee. So I know, because I'm always praying. So that prayerfulness, to try to conceive of what it really means to always be chanting Hare Krishna. Always be chanting Hare Krishna. What does that mean? It means it's going on underneath, And even when you're doing something else. Not easy to get to that point. But that's what the pure devotee do. It's always going on. Chanting is going on. And it's not just an object of meditation. They're actually calling out to Krishna. There's a part of their heart that's calling to Krishna. In separation, to save me, to keep me packed up at your lotus feet, whatever it is. There's an intentionality of it. And that feeling of helplessness without Krishna's protection is an important part of the most advanced devotee's mentality. And we see, the great devotees like the prayers and the Antya Lila. Krishna's Kaviraj, Durgame Patimindasya, Skalat Bharakate Mahu, Sokipayasti Darnena, Santak Sanfavalambanam. I think this is number 1 in the Antya Lila. And Krishna's Kaviraj is saying there, my passage is very difficult. Durgame, it's difficult to go. I'm slipping at every step. Durgame Pati, my path. Durgame Andasya, I'm blinded. Skalat Padagatam, I'm slipping on the rocks, May the saints grant me the walking stick of their mercy, so that I can proceed nicely on this. So he really feels like that. The problem we have is that we become complacent. We chant a little Hare Krishna, we feel the benefits, we feel a little detachment, and we forget how tenuous our position is. The really great devotees are always praying, and always calling out. Whenever they're chanting, you can hear the sincerity. So that this is one of the great advantages of this Kali Yuga. I've pointed this out many times, that because it's such a difficult age, therefore the Lord has made it easy with this chanting process, right? There's an ocean of faults, but there's one very great quality of this age. Just by chanting Krishna's name, one can become free of a detachment and go back to guided. That's right there in the 12th canto. But one has to know the cultivation of knowledge of how dangerous this material energy is, what a difficult position we're in, what a difficult position I'm in, and react accordingly by calling out to Krishna helplessly, even if you got $1 million. There's just the Janmaishwarya Shuddha Shibirus. So that advantage is lost as soon as we forget Krishna and we get bewildered by the material energy. Then the qualities of Kali Yuga, which is so horrific and is just saturated with the temptations and gross sense gratification, can overwhelm us. So we have this wonderful process of chanting, and now the chanting the holy name and all of the other mantras that emanate from it. The whole Stavamala, all the writings of the Goswamis, they're all just expansions on the holy name. The holy name is complete. It's in the Shastra, Purnam, Shuddho, Nityamukta. That means it's a complete manifestation of Krishna. The holy name of Krishna is not different. So we have that opportunity to chant. And we're very fortunate to have the inspiration to chant. It's rare. Aho Badashra Pachoto Gariyan. How glorious are those, even the dog ears, who are chanting your name. Somehow on the tip of their tongue your name is flowing from previous lifetimes. So we have to take advantage of the value of this age in our own situation, and always be praying and cultivating this mood of prayerfulness as we chant, and learn more explicit chantings. There's so many beautiful ones. And many of them are desperate calls to the Lord. Like in the Chaitanya Chandramrita, which is by Prabodhananda Saraswati, the uncle of Gopal Bhatta Goswami, very wonderful devotee. He wrote many books, and one of them is this Nectar Boon of Lord Chaitanya. And there's a whole chapter in there where the author laments his pitiable condition. This is Prabodhananda Saraswati. And some of the verses, we can relate to. Kala Kalir Balana Indriya Vaidi Varga Shri Bhakti Marga Hiya Kantaka Koti Ruddha Ha Ha Kuyami Vikalak Kimahankaromi Chaitanya Chandra Yadinaja Kipankaroshi. So he's saying something that we can totally relate to. My dear Lord, it's the age of Kali. Kala Kalir. And my enemies, my senses have become very powerful. Balana Indriya Vaidi Varga. Sri Bhakti Marga, the wonderful path of Bhakti Marga, is overgrown with so many brambles and obscure things constituting different false philosophies and everything. It's not easy, this path. So, Balan Indriya, Sri Bhakti Marga, Kantaka Koti Ruddha, is blocked in so many ways. Ha ha Kvayami, alas, alas, what shall I do? Where shall I go if you, Lord Chaitanya, do not show me your mercy right now? He's just calling out to the Lord like that. And there's a bunch of verses that way. We can easily relate to that verse. There's one at the end, what is he? I forget the actual Sanskrit, but he's saying, Lord Chaitanya has come to this age in the middle of this Kali Yuga, and he's brought with him the ocean of prema bhakti for Krishna. And I'm so unfortunate that not even a drop of that ocean has touched me. Alas, alas. This is part of that chapter, my favorite chapter. I made a recording of this whole thing I can give you. So that's the mood we have to be in. In spite of ourselves, we're feeling benefits of bhakti, we're feeling detached from so much nonsense out there, and we're feeling a little attracted to Krishna and the holy name. And all that. But we have to know that that's just a taste of what we can feel. And it all depends on our depth of concentration and sincerity of heart, the service attitude. It all depends on that. It doesn't depend on how many years or anything like that. It's all up to us, and we all have we have the knowledge, we have the holy name, we have the prasadam, we have the temple, we have the deities. So much facility. We should use it. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.